Hey y'all, Beasley here. Welcome back to the channel. Today's episode is kind of a crossover with my original YouTube channel, Tulsa Beasley. As I have focused more on baseball content recently, I've gotten away from exploring my own neighborhood, the Riverview neighborhood of Tulsa, Oklahoma. But today we are back in the neighborhood and talking about baseball because the greatest baseball game that you have never heard of happened right here in my neighborhood. Let's take a walk a few blocks from here at Cyrus Avery Plaza. We're going to cross the neighborhood over to Dream Keepers Park. I'm going to show you a few highlights along the way, give you a taste of what my original channel is all about. I will leave a link to that channel in the description of this video. So let's get out and explore Tulsa's Riverview neighborhood.
Only one block downriver from my little 1930 apartment on the sandy banks of the Arkansas River, the 1929 Bruce Goff Riverside Studio. I have frequented this theater for 10 years or so and have been a member of the board of directors since 2021. But we're here to talk about baseball. And just downriver from Spotlight Theater is the McBurney Mansion. The McBurney brothers, James and Sam, were brought to Tulsa from Kansas in the 1890s as ringers for a local bank's baseball team. In the late 19th century, local baseball teams were sponsored by local companies, and the players were usually employees of that company. James was hired on as a clerk, Sam as a janitor. James McBurney rose to become vice president of the Exchange Bank before opening his own Bank of Commerce and building this Tudor Revival mansion in 1928. Sam McBurney went on to become the first football coach for the University of Tulsa. Being a professional baseball player in the early 20th century was not as financially lucrative as today. The majority of baseball players had to work during the off-season to pay the bills when not playing ball. Barnstorming was common, particularly in the South and in the West, areas that had moderate winter weather and that lacked Major League Baseball teams. Well-known players could make good money traveling the nation and playing in exhibition games. One thing that was the same then as it is today, owners want to make money. Early in 1913, Chicago White Sox owner Charles Comiskey and New York Giants manager John McGraw began talks to get their respective teams on the road during the off-season for a nationwide tour. As discussion progressed, the idea progressed to getting the best players available and making it a worldwide tour. My neighborhood's Quick Trip at 15th and Denver and Tulsa. I am here often, sometimes daily, occasionally multiple times in a day. I'm going to grab a coffee before we continue the story of the greatest baseball game that you have never heard of. The eventual plan was to start that off-season tour right after the World Series. That would not be a problem for Comiskey's White Sox as they finished the season in 5th place in the National League, more than 17 games behind the pennant-winning Philadelphia Athletics. John McGraw's New York Giants, however, were headed to the World Series to face those Philadelphia Athletics. With superstar pitcher Christy Mathewson leading the team, 1913 was the third year in a row for the Giants to take home the American League pennant. In the best-of-7 World Series, Connie Mack's Philadelphia Athletics needed only 5 games to become the world champions on October 11th. But there was little time for the losing Giants to relax as their worldwide tour was scheduled to begin in Cincinnati only 1 week later. These entry columns were built in 1909, marking the Carlton Place district of the Riverview neighborhood. For many years, there was an iron arch over Carson Avenue connecting the columns. Several decades ago, that arch was ripped off by a moving truck. Being too low for larger modern vehicles, the arches could not be replaced. What is replaced when needed is asphalt. Over time, asphalt is worn away, uncovering the original brick streets of our tree-lined neighborhood. The U.S. portion of the off-season tour started in Cincinnati, moving south, then west to California, then north, playing in Vancouver, British Columbia on November 19th. 31 games in 27 cities in 32 days. From there, players boarded a ship and sailed for Japan. Not all were willing to be gone until the return date of March 6th of 1914. Giants pitcher Christy Mathewson and his catcher John Myers were amongst those that left the tour. But 24 major leaguers and several of the players' wives did board that ship and set out for Japan, China, Australia, Egypt, Italy, France, and England before returning the following year on the Lusitania. While the formal establishment of the Riverview neighborhood was in 1905, permanent settlement in this neighborhood dates back to the 1830s. This ancient post oak tree, called the Council Oak, marks the end of the Trail of Tears for the Lochapoka Band of the Muskogee Nation. Forcibly removed from their ancestral homes in Alabama by the Indian Removal Act, the Lochapoka placed the embers of their home fires here on this ridge overlooking the Arkansas River. Across the street from the Council Oak, the Muskogee Stickball Grounds, and only one block down the hill our destination, Dreamkeepers Park. As we can see from this Sanborn map of the area in 1915, there was a baseball field here in Dreamkeepers Park. Having organized baseball since the 1890s, there were a number of ballparks in Tulsa. This park was simply called South Main Street Park and was home to the Tulsa Terriers of the Oklahoma State League. Center and right field were against 21st Street. This ballpark was the chosen location for the greatest baseball game that you have never heard of, October 28th, 1913. If you have watched other episodes on this channel, you know that I use my collection of baseball cards and baseball memorabilia to tell the stories of the games, the teams, and the players. The playing days cards of these players are well beyond my budget, so I will use stock photos of trading cards for these players. Notable players representing the National League champion New York Giants on the tour. At second base, Larry Doyle, the 1912 league MVP. On first, Fred Merkle, poor fellow. If you know, well, you know. Hall of Fame pitcher Christy Mathewson and his catcher, Native American John Myers. And in the outfield, possibly the best all-around athlete in history, Jim Thorpe. Playing for the White Sox. At first base, Hall of Famer Sam Crawford. On third, George Buck Weaver, later notorious for his role in the 1919 Black Sox scandal. Hall of Famer and Boston Red Sox outfielder Tris Speaker's socks turned white when he joined the Chicago team for this tour. Hall of Fame pitcher Urban Red Faber was the regular starting pitcher for the traveling White Sox team. Walter Johnson, pitcher for the Washington Nationals of the American League in 1913, was not a regular on the tour. From Humboldt, Kansas, Johnson lived in Coffeyville, Kansas during the off-season. Coffeyville is about 70 miles north of Tulsa on the Oklahoma-Kansas border. Johnson made his way to Tulsa specifically to duel Mathewson on the mound. As the New York Giants were in the National League and Washington was in the American League, the two teams never played each other during the regular season. On October 28, 1913, Walter Johnson suited up for the White Sox. Johnson and Mathewson are amongst the very best pitchers in baseball history. Mathewson pitched from 1900 to 1916 and remains ranked in the top 10 in many pitching categories. He was among the first 5 members of the inaugural class of the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1936, which included Mathewson, Ty Cobb, Honus Wagner, Babe Ruth, and his opponent of that October afternoon in Tulsa, Walter Johnson. Johnson pitched for Washington from 1907 until 1927. Arguably the greatest pitcher to ever play the game, Johnson holds pitching records that will likely never be broken. Attendance numbers are not documented, but estimates are that more than 5,000 fans came to South Main Street Park. 6 special trains had come to Tulsa from around eastern Oklahoma, and Tulsa schools dismissed their students for the afternoon. There was snow the day before, and cold temperatures remained. This sweater, worn by Christy Mathewson on that day, is on display at the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Due to the strain of the record crowds, a section of bleachers collapsed before the game, leaving many injured and delaying the start of the game. But the show did go on, beginning 90 minutes after the scheduled first pitch time. The epic matchup between the iconic hurlers began as expected, with no runs being scored in the first 3 innings before the White Sox bats exploded. Christy Mathewson left the game after 4 innings, having given up 2 runs, and was replaced by George Hooks Wiltsey. Walter Johnson pitched the duration, striking out 8 in the shutout win. Leading all hitters, Buck Weaver had 3 singles and 2 doubles for 5 hits in 5 plate appearances. The greatest applause of the afternoon came when favorite son, Olympic champion, Yale, Oklahoma native, NFL Hall of Famer Jim Thorpe came to the plate. He had 2 plate appearances and 1 hit. Walter Johnson led the Chicago White Sox to victory over Christy Mathewson and the 1913 National League champion New York Giants by the final score of 6-0. Notable hitters for the Sox, Hall of Famer Sam Crawford had 1 single and 2 doubles, and Hall of Famer Tris Speaker had 2 singles and 1 double on the afternoon. The greatest baseball game that you have never heard of, featuring 6 Hall of Famers. Christy Mathewson versus Walter Johnson with native son Jim Thorpe right here in the outfield, right here, Dreamkeepers Park in the Riverview neighborhood of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Bonus footage, river views from Riverview